It's been almost 2 decades since we started our journey to educate and help you take action so you may better manage your financial future. Our goal is to help you accomplish your life's purpose. This podcast reveals financial tips, strategies, and insights that will help you to set your financial goals and guide you along the way. This is Managing Your Financial Future, brought to you by the advisors at Lucia Capital Group. Whoa, podcast time. It's podcast time. Johnny Dean and Professor Rick Plum, Certified Financial Planner. I'm your host, of course. You may have figured that out by now. All of you longtime listeners are, you're not really my guest, Professor Plum, but I guess in a way you are. You're like it's like somebody who doesn't have any friends. They have one guest come by. You've been one of the few guests that we've had, other than Janine Stripe, Chris Lloyd, and maybe a few others. So anyway, welcome to you.
Well, thank you. I'm having fun being here.
Yeah.
I enjoy this.
I enjoy it too. We are this close, as I've been saying for a while, to getting us back into the same studios together.
We are not in the same studio yet, though.
We have not been for more than a year now. For more than a year, we have not been facing one another here as we usually do with all of our visual cues and verbal whatever. But we've made it work. And today... Well, I should mention too, I'm not an advisor. I try to remind people of that. I mean, I don't have the letters after my name. I am a dean, but just by name only. I'm a JD, just because those are my initials. But other than that, I'm nothing like a CFP, but you are, and that's why we have you here today. And I wanted to talk about something. We haven't talked about this for quite some time, and I think over the next couple of weeks we're going to start getting back to certain basics here. And today I want to mention something about gifting. Man, okay. Oh man, if I had to pick a topic where there's confusion all around, I think gifting would be one of the top 3 choices.
Yeah, I've had at least 3 conversations in the last week with advisors and clients about that particular issue, gifting, and what is and what is not. What is it expensive? Does it cost this? And who should and should not be worried about it or doing it?
And there's such a thing. Many people have heard of a thing called a gift tax. And I think that's where it sort of it's kind of a launching point for the confusion or the misinformation to start. If I give somebody a gift, what do I have to pay tax? They have to pay a tax. If I hand over, $100 to somebody, do they have to report it? So this is I want to use at least the next few minutes or several minutes to clear up some of the confusion and talk about the different aspects of gifting. So, Professor Plum, you said you've talked to some people already. What have their issues been?
A lot of people. I was talking to an advisor who had a client that was looking to help their children buy a house and wanted to give them a decent size amount of money to be able to put down on the house so that their mortgage isn't outrageous. I spoke to a couple of other individuals who are on the higher net worth area. They were in the 8 to 10, $12 million range of net worth. Mm-hmm. And they were looking for estate planning and how to reduce and gift and do other things. So gifting comes up quite a bit. And one of the first misunderstandings is that the gift tax system is completely separate from income tax. They're not the same. And in fact, gifting doesn't necessarily change anything in the income tax world, or the income tax changing the gift tax world. A gift tax is purely on money that is transferred from party A to party B. Now, do we have a gift tax in the U.S.? Well, the answer is yes, we do. There are 2 basic types of gifts. One is a non-taxable gift, and the other is a taxable gift. Pretty easy to identify there, right?
Sure.
Yeah. And where we get the confusion, though, is that a non-taxable gift is any gift up to the first $15,000 in value in total for the year that one person gives to another, somebody who is not their spouse, not their U.S. citizen spouse, I should say. So if I'm moving money to my kids, to my friends, to anybody other than my spouse, if I give more than $15,000 in any one given year, I've maxed out my non-taxable gift. The 15,000 is just a number that they use. It's been around here for a little while, and there's no gift tax. Now, technically, and this is where the confusion comes in. Technically, once we exceed that $15,000 per recipient across the board amount of money that I'm giving
per year,
now I'm into the so-called taxable gift world. But here's where the confusion is. The government has given us a credit. The government will pay the tax. So if I make a gift of $30,000 to or $50,000 to one person, I'm technically giving them $15,000 as a non-taxable gift and $35,000 as a taxable gift. The gift tax on that $35,000 is X amount of money. But the reality is the U.S. government gives us a tax credit to pay the gift taxes on the first $11,500,000 some odd of gifts in the current law. So until I've exceeded 11 million in my lifetime, of 500,000 of gifts during my lifetime, I can just file a tax return and use the tax credit to pay it. So I actually don't pay any taxes on that big number. Now that number will change. It has changed
that
over
big
the
number.
years. The 11,500,000 some odd thousand
keeps going up, by the way.
Well, it has been going up, but there is a huge push right now with the new administration to reduce it, and reduce it quite dramatically. And
sure.
The last thing I heard or read that he said, that the new president said, was that he wanted to reduce it to 1 million. That is going back decades of value. What I think is more likely is that they'll try to make it back down to about the 3.5, somewhere between the 3.5 and 5 million per person threshold. But that still gives us quite a bit of room for making gifts if we so want it. So going to that, the person that wanted to give their kid $100,000 for a down payment, well, that's $85,000 over the annual gift limit. But $85,000 out of any one of those numbers that may happen in the future, definitely well under the current amount of gifting allowed, we don't owe any tax. It's a taxable gift that the government pays a tax on. That's the confusion.
Yeah, sounds like welfare to me. Boy, they're just writing checks for you. They're just giving away money like that to rich people.
Well, no, that just means they're not taking away money from them right now. I mean, it's like, why even have a tax and then show that there's a credit?
Yeah, that doesn't make sense. It's
just say, okay, the first X is not taxable. Once you exceed that, then we'll start actually applying a tax, and there won't be a credit against it.
I'm sure there's a reason somewhere.
But that makes sense.
Yeah, but what it is, we don't know. So technically, this year, the way under current law, what you're saying is that I could give, if I had it, $11.56, whatever it is, $1 million away. And as long as I never give another gift away beyond the annual $15,000 in my lifetime, I'll never have to worry about a gift tax.
Yeah, that is basically what we're saying. Yes.
Now it's
actually 11.7 million this year. 11.56 was last year.
Okay, it's been a couple years since I've actually looked it up, but yeah, now the giver and the givee. You've got two people in this, as I understand it. And correct me if I'm wrong. The givee rarely, if ever, owes any tax. It's mostly on the giver.
If I'm in a situation where I'm wealthy enough to exceed the 11.7 and I make taxable gifts over and above the credit, and I'm actually assessed a tax from a gift tax or even an estate tax, because they're kind of one and the same right now, whether I give it during my lifetime or I give it at my passing, it's the same credit. It is my responsibility as the donor, the giver, to pay the tax. It is not the recipient's it's not the tax on the recipient, unless I've given you every dollar I have and I have no more money to pay the tax, and then the government will go after the person receiving the money.
Yeah, I don't know how often that happens. I suppose it does.
Well, that happens more on the estate side than the gift side.
Oh, absolutely. And that's where also some of the confusion comes in again. Because when we talk about gifting and all this, right now, as you just said, it's sort of included within your entire estate. So if I had an estate worth, say, $5.5 million, everything, and I'd given away in my lifetime $6.5 million. Well, that adds up to what? $12 million? $12 million. $12 million. The lifetime exclusion this year is 11.7 something. So technically, I am now at the end. If I died, I'd be $300,000 over. So there would be.
If we can't find $300,000 in deductible expenses on your passing, then your estate technically would owe some taxes on $3 million or $300,000 overage in that area. You owe about $120,000 in tax today.
Right. But for most people, this really isn't going to be an issue, I would assume, Professor Plum.
It's not. Like the person that was trying to give their child some money. The idea is that they were going to have to, does the IRS, the person that was giving the $100,000 was worth about $2 million. They could afford to give it, but they also weren't anywhere near the records. That was a husband and wife worth that much. Does the IRS really want the gift tax return on somebody who will never owe gift taxes? Yeah. Probably not. Does that person owe gift taxes? Nope. And so they were worried about the tax of giving their child $100,000, which is $85,000 over the annual gift exemption, when in reality, that's not the worry. The worry is, can you afford to make the gift? And is it something that was appropriate? On the other side, I was talking to somebody, one of the more wealthy individuals, about reducing the estate and giving money to their kids. They have twin daughters in college, age 24, grad school. And he was talking about reducing the estate, and the thought, somebody had told him about gifting. He and his wife could give $15,000 each to each of the kids, so they could give $30,000, $30,000, $60,000 out of the estate every year. And he said, that sounds all well and good, but I'm just not ready to give a 24-year-old $30,000 yet.
Oh yeah,
I'm going to wait a little longer. I understand it may cost them in the end with the estate tax, but right now, I'm just, until I see they're good kids. They're doing everything fine, but there's a lot of outside influences that are yet to happen in their life.
Wait till you see
fiancés, husbands.
Wait till you see who they get married to first, and then give that.
That's kind of where the gentleman was going.
Give that a good 5, 6, 7 years. Make sure you got the right individual. Then maybe. But of course, sometimes that's what trusts are for. So there's always that option. Let's go back for just a moment now. You mentioned, and we've mentioned a couple of times here, the $15,000 annual limit. Let's explain what that is. It doesn't mean that if I were really generous and I had 5 kids and I wanted to give them each some money, that doesn't mean that I can have to take $15,000 divided by 5. I can only give them each $3,000 per year. How does that work? Let's explain that.
The non-taxable gift is per recipient. And so we've used this example in the past. I could stand on the corner with bundles of $15,000 bills and hand them out to each person that walked by me. I don't even have to know the people. And as long as nobody got in line twice, that's a non-taxable, non-reportable, nothing has to, I could be doing that to as many people as walk by, as long as they don't walk by twice.
In the same year.
In the same year. Now, if I did it on December 31st, we could come back on January 1st and do it again.
Right.
Different year. So what was that?
Well, no, I was just thinking it's per calendar year. Anybody who wants to get it can get it. Now, if you happen to give over that, if I happen to give one person in the same year $50,000. Well,
right now I'm over.
Now I'm over by $35,000. I am technically, you're saying, supposed to fill out Form 709 on my tax return that year and state, gee whiz, I gave $35,000 more than I was legally allowed to by law. So here's your form. Take $35,000 off of my $11 million whatever $1,000 credit, right?
And if you're Jeff Bezos, you better be doing that.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Because you know that your estate tax return is going to be scrutinized like crazy. If you're John Dean or Rick Plum, probably don't have to worry about that unless we win the lottery.
Well, yeah. And I mean, this is something that's, your estate is when you die. And if you give stuff away when you're 40 years old, I mean, if I gave, $20,000 instead of $15,000 one year, I mean, even if I were worth more than 11 some odd million, I don't even know if they'd find it. It's a really screwy kind of system.
Well, let's not talk about finding it. Let's talk about what's legal. And if you're in that area, then you should be filing the gift tax return.
Right. But I might, you're supposed to file, what I'm saying is you're supposed to file it so that you don't forget about it 40 years later when your estate happens. But
This is simply the law. Gift taxing is really odd. And I think what we're trying to say on this, Professor Plum, is that for most people, you really shouldn't probably have to worry all that much about it, right?
For most people that are worth, less than 3.5 to 5 million, right now less than 11.7, but I think that number may come down in the not too distant future, but I don't think it's going to go down less. This is pure speculation. 3.5 to 5 million. If you're not worth 3.5 to 5 million each, individually, you probably don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, if you're married, it's because it's on an individual basis that is actually doubled. So if you're married,
it's per person,
it'd be $23.4 something million this year. So that's a lot. Now, I guess the other people that do have to worry about it. You read about these athletes. They get a $50 million signing bonus, and they buy their, mom a $1 million house. They buy their, this person.
But they're also going to be in the spotlight, and many of them are going to be well over the limit. And so they need to be more careful about what they're doing with gift taxing. There's the old story of Anna Nicole Smith when she received her engagement ring. I don't know how true any of this is because I wasn't there, didn't talk to any of them. But the gentleman said, this is not a gift yet. It's not completed. And if you don't go through with it, it comes back to me, because otherwise he would be making a gift to a non-spouse at that time. And that ring was worth more than the estate tax limit at the time.
That's right. The limit was like 2 million, or I forget.
I think when they got engaged, it was closer to $1 million.
Was it? Seems like it was like 600,000 at some point. Then it jumped up to $1 million, or it was 650 or something. Then it jumped to $1 million. This was in the early part of the 2000s.
2009, it went to $3.5 million. 2010, it was repealed altogether. And then 2011, it was supposed to go back down to $1 million, but they passed a new law that set it, and it's been climbing ever since.
Yeah. Okay. So if you really don't have to worry, I don't mean to spend all this time on something that most people don't have to worry about, but we do get questions on this. We get questions from people who say, I'm really afraid to do this. And in many cases, for just the average person, at least the average person that you deal with, Professor Plum, I would think, that they want to do things like, okay, yeah, I'd love to pay for a down payment on a home is a big one that I would imagine you get quite a bit. What about things like paying for college? Where does that fit in to the gifting?
Paying for college. Now, there are certain things that an individual can do that is not considered a gift. It's not a taxable gift. It's not a non-taxable gift. If I pay for my children's college education directly, that is not part of the gifting issue. If I pay for somebody's medical expenses directly, that is not part of the gifting issue. So, I mean, if I had a large estate and I was worried about gifting, I could be giving each of my kids $15,000 a year, and I could be paying for their education expenses. And if they had medical expenses, I could be paying for those. And those medical and education expenses are not considered part of the gift values.
Okay.
That comes in handy.
Let's say there's an exclusive club, horse riding club or something for ultra rich people, and I want to buy this for a niece or a nephew or a friend, a neighbor, whatever, and it costs $25,000, and I pay for that. Is that considered also a gift? I mean, I'm not handing it to them; I'm buying something for them. Is that considered a gift?
And you are giving them something. You are giving them membership or ownership of that particular issue. And was it a medical expense?
No.
Was it a qualified education expense? No. So that's a gift.
So technically that's a gift. Now, if you buy it for your own kid and the kid is, say, under 18, does that play into the gifting thing? If they're 16 years old and I want to...
The ages don't have anything to do with
So
this.
that doesn't matter.
No, there's no age limit on whether you can or cannot give gifts as far as the gift tax rules.
So if it's not part of the normal... I'm just trying to think of scenarios here that where it may affect certain people. If I'm gifting something,
you're talking about people that are exceptionally beyond wealthy, giving young children mansions on their own that for them to live in. And
well,
I don't know
I'm
what you're
speaking
about.
more of
not talking about normal people, that's for sure.
No, but I'm speaking more of people who maybe have a couple million, but they want to send their kid to overseas for an experience that's not school related.
Well, nothing wrong with that. But it's just not an exemption.
So that
it's
would
either part of
be
the $15,000 a year, or it's part of the taxable gift exclusion.
Yeah, I mean, I've known people who've given their 16-year-old kids Oh, man. 16-year-old kid's a $40,000 automobile. And they aren't, they aren't.
But that's only $10,000. If it's a married couple giving it to them, that's only $10,000 over the limit anyway.
Yeah, but even so, I mean, technically, they're supposed to be filing that gift tax form 709, right?
Are they worth $7, $8, $9 million?
Well, not that I know of, not in my head. Maybe they are, but I mean, they should be doing it anyway. Maybe the IRS doesn't want it necessarily, or maybe it will turn out to be a non-issue. In that case,
if they're close to the limits, then yeah, the IRS would want it. But if you've got $1 million and you buy your kid a $40,000 car, the bigger issue with gifting isn't, I don't think the taxation is, can you afford to make that kind of a gift?
Well, see, there you go. Now you're off sort of the gifting portion of it, and you're on to the planning side, which is something that I think
right.
that
I always
you would be looking
fall
at.
back to the planning side.
One last thing on this before we have to go. We've talked about outright gifts, things like uniform gift to minors, uniform transfer to minor accounts, UGMA, UTMA, things like that. Do you see those around anymore?
Oh, yeah, periodically we see them. Those are ownerships. They are accounts where money has been transferred from a parent to a child, or a child has accumulated a bunch of money through. It could be from their own work, but children under the age of 18 aren't supposed to have their own bank accounts, or they received a bunch of money from family and relatives for birthdays and things. Some people give lots of money. And while cumulatively nobody went over the $15,000, or individually nobody went over the $15,000 limit, cumulatively they may have accumulated quite a bit of money in these accounts. The UTMA is more of a control issue where somebody, the age of majority, usually the parent, is the custodian, is kind of overseeing the account on the behalf of the owner being somebody under the age of 18 or 21, depending on how it's set up. And so because minors aren't supposed to be in control of financial things.
No.
And so there's somebody that's in control of it that is the age of majority. And so a UTMA, a Uniform Transfer to Minors Act, that's where the money belongs to that minor. Uniform Gift to Minors Act, that's where the money belongs to the minor. But they're not in control of it because they're not of legal age to be in control. The parent, guardian, whoever, is in control of it until they reach the age specified on the account. Now, most states, unless you do something else, it's 18. Some states you can say as late as age 21. If you want to go past that, then you're going to get into the world of trusts.
So at age 18 or 21, this money, whether I sign it over or not, whether I do anything or not, the 18-year-old or 21-year-old, whatever, it has a legal right to that particular money.
They've always have the legal right to it. Now they have the legal control over it.
Yeah. So
it's not like I remember listening to a talk show host 20 years ago say,
yeah,
well, just don't sign it over to them. Well, that's not the way it works. If I'm a newly 18-year-old, 19-year-old person, and I know that I have this account out there that I have not had access to because my parents have been in charge of it, I can call the bank, brokerage company, wherever it is, and say, I am so-and-so, and I am sending you my birth certificate, and I am 18 or 21 or older, and it is now my account. I want to take my parents off of it. And there's nothing that parent can do to stop that.
No. Now, if you happen to have one of these UGMA or UTMAs that you set up before thinking your kid was going to be great, and as you approach age 18, you start to see that they're not going to be responsible or they're doing whatever it is, I guess there are certain things you can do to protect yourself, or at least protect the money that's in there, Professor, as the custodian until they turn 18. What sort of things very quickly can you do?
You can put it into something that's very illiquid that they can't sell. I've heard of people borrowing the money and putting a trust deed in it. So now it's not in a brokerage account. The child owns a small trust deed, or maybe it's a large trust deed, on the house. And so they're getting payments. And so they can get the income from it every year, but they can't get the principal for a period of years. And so
can you spend it on things? Can you spend it on non-essentials? Like, bail.
Being the parent?
How about bail? Yes.
The parent can use it for whatever is in the best interest of the child.
Right.
For that child. So if the kid needs bailing out, you can spend it on the kid's bail.
There you go.
So I mean, the parents can spend it for that child. That $40,000 car that can come from the kid's UTMA
right.
account.
There are ways
for
to
the
get
kid.
around that. We're out of time here, but I wanted to bring this up. We're going to spend the next, I think, the next few podcasts at least, maybe getting back to some of the basics. I know gifting isn't necessarily one of the basic things that people think about, but honestly, it is something. It can be an issue, especially when you don't think about it. And if your estate happens to be large enough, by the time you're gone, your kids or your heirs could wind up paying some type of estate tax, and the estate tax rates get pretty high pretty quickly, do they not?
They start if you are actually in the area where you're going to pay it, it's 40%.
Yeah, 40%, which shows you too, by the way, that when you're doing planning and you're doing this succession planning, it's very important that you understand where you are on the estate limits, because things can get pretty hairy, pretty ugly, pretty quickly. So it's always good to inform your kids or your heirs exactly of what you're doing, how much you have, and get your planning in. Make sure you have a plan. Make sure you have a strategy. All right, we're out of time. I think next week, Professor Plum, on our next podcast, I want to get into something that's even more common, and that has to do with annuities. I've heard good, I've heard bad. I've maybe heard more bad than good, yet knowing something about them myself, and you, of course, knowing a whole heck of a lot about them, I think we need to set the record straight on that. So next week, we're going to be talking a little bit about that. If you want to get in touch with Professor Plum, there are all kinds of services that Professor Plum provides, and the folks at Lucia Capital Group, beyond just things, advice on Social Security or estate planning or whatever it happens to be. 800-644-1150, the number at Lucia Capital Group. You can reach them directly, talk to Professor Plum or any of the Lucia Capital Group advisors. 800-644-1150. You can also get in touch with them at our website, luciacap.com, luciacap.com. It's been a fun show. We got a whole lot more coming up. I appreciate you listening. Make sure you subscribe to us. Tell your friends about us. Download the podcast. Listen as often as you can. For our certified financial planner professional, Professor Rick Plum, I'm Johnny Dean, podcast host, podcast moderator. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you again next time.
The information provided should not be considered specific tax, legal, or investment advice and is not specific to any individual's personal circumstances. To the extent that this material concerns tax matters, it is not intended or written to be used and cannot be used by a taxpayer for the purpose of avoiding penalties that may be imposed by law. Each taxpayer should seek independent advice from a tax professional based on his or her individual circumstances. Different types of investments and or investment strategies involve varying levels of risk, and there can be no assurance that any specific investment or investment strategy, including the investments purchased and or investment strategies devised by LCG, will either be suitable or profitable for a client's or prospective client's portfolio. Thus, investments may result in a loss of principal. Accordingly, no client or prospective client should assume that the presentation or any component thereof serves as the receipt of or a substitute for personalized advice from LCG or from any other investment professional. You should always seek counsel of the appropriate advisor prior to making any investment decision. All investments are subject to risk, including the loss of principal. This material was gathered from sources believed to be reliable. However, its accuracy cannot be guaranteed. These materials are provided for general information and educational purposes based upon publicly available information from sources believed to be reliable. We cannot assure the accuracy or completeness of these materials. The information in these materials may change at any time and without notice. Annuities are long-term investment products designed for retirement purposes. Guarantees are based on the claims-paying ability of the issuer, subject to their terms and conditions. Early withdrawals may be subject to surrender penalties and, if taken prior to age 59.5, may be subject to an additional 10% federal tax. Annuities are not FDIC insured. Certain terms and conditions apply, so please read insurance company materials carefully. The information provided is based on current laws, which are subject to change at any time. Lucia Capital Group is not affiliated with or endorsed by the Social Security Administration or any government agency. Social Security rules can be complex. For more information about Social Security benefits, visit the SSA website at ssa.gov or call 800-772-1213 to speak with an SSA representative. Rick Plum, Janine Stripe, and Chris Lloyd are registered representatives with and securities and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor, and member FINRA SIPC. The investment professionals are affiliated with LPL Financial and are conducting business using the name Lucia Capital Group, a separate entity from LPL Financial.